Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Gorman on Target, a program that is brought to you by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, which is Manchester's greatest little secret. And we are dedicated to firearm safety, training, and education. That is our main thrust. Tonight for a guest, I have Mrs. Susan Olsen, a long friend and colleague of mine for, for quite a while.
Plenty of time, yeah.
Plenty of time. And she's graciously agreed to come up with us this evening and to have some dialogue and have a little bit of fun here today. So, Susan, why don't you tell the folks who you are, what you do, and fill us in.
Boy, that's quite an opening. Yeah. No, I'm just a little old lady living here in New Hampshire.
Ha!
I am the past chair and the current director of legislation for the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire. Uh-huh. And you mentioned safety, education, and training.
Yes.
At Wilson Hill.
Yes.
Well, that's part of there are two arms of the Women's Defense League. I think you guys had a bit of a chat about it last week. But one arm is training education for women. The other half is advocacy.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of my thing. Although I am an NRA pistol instructor as well as a safety in the home instructor as well.
Okay.
So, being a longtime firearm owner,
yes.
Took me almost 30 years to decide I probably should have some formal training, and it was amazing to me all the bad habits that I overcame. So, but in any event, my side of the Defense League is primarily the advocacy side, and we've been very active this year, and in fact, my partner here in legislative activity, Miss Kimberly Morin. So, yeah, parking's a little tough, huh?
Well, Kimberly, welcome to the show again. I know what you're going to say. The parking is atrocious.
Last week, it was easy, but I forgot St. Patty's Day, and there's all the pubs, so
yeah. Yeah, I brought my friend Sean O'Malley here today. He's dying to meet you. There's a few comments, Well, firearms and training. So we were just getting started, and I take it you know Mrs. Susan Olsen.
Quite well.
Yes.
So why don't we continue on with you, Susan? That was a great opening.
Well, I was saying that my primary focus with the Women's Defense League is on the legislative side, and Kim and I, and also our current chair, Michelle Lavelle, make up the three-team legislative affairs group. This year, we focused our attention on one bill, what's Senate Bill 116, to allow in New Hampshire what is called constitutional carry, which is kind of a fancy term, but what this bill particularly does is it makes optional the current pistol revolver license that one procures through the Department of Safety. You know as well as I do that in New Hampshire, you may legally own a firearm and keep it loaded in your house, right, with nothing other than having gone to your FFL to purchase that firearm. However, if you want to take that firearm out of your house, loaded, and either put it in your car or in your pocketbook, or if it's cold and you are open carrying and that coat might drape over that open carried firearm, you would have to have a Mother May I piece of paper from the Department of Safety. And this has been in effect since 1923. The particular RSA 159.6, I believe it is, was passed by the New Hampshire Senate in response to an influx of immigrants. And on this day, it seems absolutely appropriate to say that the predominant majority of those immigrants were Irish, Also Italians. They were all legal immigrants. They may not have been necessarily citizens at the time, but certainly legal immigrants. And the dons at the New Hampshire Senate decided that, golly gee whiz, we just don't think any of these people could, carry a firearm, because we need to make sure that they're suitable, which we think is just a code word for profiling, racial profiling. And worse, it's become a code word for a gender bias, because women had the right to carry a loaded firearm before this bill was passed. So it's a bad piece of legislation. The legislation's good. The law is bad. The law is outdated. The law was misguided. It was profiling, and we opposed it. Now, that being said, the license would remain optional for people in order that they might, say they go to somewhere, South Carolina or Pennsylvania or Idaho or Wyoming or any of the 22 states with which New Hampshire has a reciprocity agreement. They could have that license to show that local law enforcement that indeed they are.
Now, would that be recognized in these jurisdictions if you had a valid license to carry here in New Hampshire?
Absolutely. It is now. It is now. And in fact, I spent part of my morning yesterday at the Department of Safety scanning some of these reciprocity agreements. This was in response to a right-to-know request that was filed to see them. And
so let me ask you this, and Kim, maybe you can answer it, because you and I sort of got around on this thing a little bit last week, and then unfortunately we ran out of time. They don't give us 3 or 4 hours. It's too bad.
Well, they should, Don.
They should. Absolutely. So Kim, let me ask you this. So I'm going to Florida. Florida recognizes my New Hampshire license. I have a valid New Hampshire license, and when I get to Florida, it's going to be recognized, so I'm perfectly okay once I'm in Florida. However, I've got to go through Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, all the fun places in the United States to not be carrying a gun.
Right.
So what do I do about that?
You have to, there's specific laws, but you have to lock it typically in the trunk or away from the front of the vehicle. In my case, I have a Jeep, so I'd have to lock it way in the back, in the farthest back where I couldn't reach it. It has to be locked, and the ammo has to be separate, I believe. Because federal law allows you to carry through those states as long as it's locked away, as long as your end state is, you're legally able to carry it in that end state.
Okay. Let me, so there's no misunderstanding on this. That federal law allows you to carry firearms through those jurisdictions. But ammunition is not specifically mentioned. So in my classes, when people ask that, I say your safest bet is to leave your ammunition here, transport your firearm. When you get to your destination, either purchase ammo or whatever. That way there's no question, there's no problem, and you're ahead of the curve. So in other words, if I am going from New Hampshire to Florida again, and I have an unloaded firearm, it's locked in the trunk of my car, and I am what does this mean, I have to drive directly to the other jurisdiction? Can I stop for gas? Or?
You can stop for gas, you can stop to get something to eat, but you cannot stop overnight. The length of stay cannot be longer than a certain amount of time to make it look like you might be staying there, or might be, overstaying more than just stopping. So stopping at a gas station, stopping to get something to eat, but not overnight. I would not do it.
Going down to the casino for 3 or 4 days doesn't count.
No, that doesn't count.
You can't do that.
No, that doesn't count.
Really? Oh, how about visiting Grandma?
Well, Grandma probably has a gun, so I don't need to take mine.
It's very,
Knowing your grandmother, you're probably right on that
buddy.
one. Either one.
The thing I would recommend to anyone is, if they do plan on traveling, find out the laws. Specifically, find out the laws. If they're traveling, find out how they can, how they have to lock the gun up, and find out what the laws are in the state they're traveling to. so that they are aware of everything, because they could get stopped by a cop who doesn't know the law.
Amen.
And it happens.
Oh,
More often than
amen.
not.
So that, you as your own citizen, you need to know the laws.
You're responsible.
Exactly. Like, even if I can fly out of Boston,
Yep.
carry my firearm, but there's certain rules for how I do it.
Right.
And you have to follow those, by the book, or
Oh,
they're
yeah.
hauling you off.
Yeah, very much. Have you ever, Susan, have you ever had occasion to do that? Travel to a legitimate state, carrying?
Legitimate state, I like that.
You like that?
I do. My personal practice would be to ship it to an FFL.
So
And then there's just no question.
explain that, because, this show is about education, and we're really into an area that is fuzzy. Mm-hmm.
We
the guy
are,
at
you're
the
right.
end of my brother-in-law told me, and he used to be a police chief. Okay, fine. So tell us about the shipping to an FL. Well, wow, what's
An
all
FFL. FFL stands for Federal Firearm License.
I
E.
see.
And that would be someone, for example, in New Hampshire, you go to a gun store, whether it's Riley's or Acme Armament or someone like that. They hold a federal firearms license, which says they may engage in the business of buying and selling firearms.
Good.
Now, say I wanted to go visit my family in San Antonio.
Okay.
Okay. And I was going to drive because it's a sort of a nice opportunity to see the countryside. I would go most likely FedEx because they're much more receptive. I could go to FedEx, properly package my firearm, and ship it after having contacted them, a federal firearms licensee in San Antonio. And that firearm would be shipped to them, and they would hold it until I appear and I show them that I am the lawful owner and that I have the license and that I have the documentation. Then there's no question. You would
So basically, to break that down in English, you're shipping your firearm from a gun dealer in New Hampshire.
don't have to send it from a gun dealer.
Okay.
I can send it via FedEx to a dealer in another state.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yes, that I can do.
I stand corrected.
Although I
do.
could go and have the, say, Riley's or Acme do that for me. Certainly I could do that.
For a fee.
For a fee.
Yeah.
But I don't have to do that. Although the guy in San Antonio may charge me $20 to let me clear his
Have your
paperwork.
gun back, yeah.
It's cheaper than a ticket in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It's
Or a lawyer.
cheaper than a year.
Or jail time.
Or
Yes.
a year in jail, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
it just makes it easier and you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, you really. It's
Older I get, the less I want to think, Don.
yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, and that's the thing that stinks living up in New Hampshire. You kind of have to go through Massachusetts, or you're going around some roundabout way to get anywhere. So even if Connecticut, you can get a concealed carry. It's just filling out an application. It costs, I think, $70, and fill out this application and fingerprints and stuff. But so I guess that's on the other side. But it's really, you really have to know the laws, because some people don't even realize they're going over the border, like that woman in Pennsylvania.
Oh.
God
She
bless
didn't
her.
realize it, and she didn't even have to tell the cop she was carrying.
was
But she
being a good
did, because she was just being. If she hadn't told
She
him,
was being a law-abiding citizen.
exactly. But she was being a law-abiding citizen and doing what she normally would have done. If she didn't do that, the cop would have never known. But because she was being a law-abiding citizen, she ended up almost getting really, really screwed, for lack of a better word.
No, I
That's a
think
great
that's the
word.
technical term, yes.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah.
So that's why all these laws in these different states, they're not meant to stop criminals. They're meant to hurt law-abiding citizens, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I was doing a scenario one time for a class, and the scenario was one of our law day classes. Once a month we do a law day class, a strictly firearms law and New Hampshire law. And so in this scenario that we were doing a carjacking. and I was the driver. And my partner comes over and yanks open the door, has a training gun. Get out of the car, I'm still in your car. And I looked at him and I said, but sir, do you realize that that firearm is not registered? And he goes, really? He said, well, I'll have to get down to the police station and register this firearm. Stay right here, I'll be right back.
Exactly.
This is the kind of mentality that's running around loose out there.
And unfortunately, that's the kind of lunatic mentality that is in our legislature. And in the Beltway up in D.C., but also at the state level across the country, not just in New Hampshire, although we have some good guys and women, but across the country. That's why we even have all these draconian gun laws in place that only hurt law-abiding citizens.
Yeah. And for some reason, some of these legislators do not get the picture. And I cannot think for a second that they're all that ignorant that they can't put two and two together. So there's other things going. I'm sorry, folks. I think I might have. So tell us a little bit about this hearing on Senate Bill 116.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was not just the hearing, but the actual vote in the Senate.
Yes.
The hearing itself was held in Reps Hall, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
And there must have been, I don't know, over the course of the day, 150 people in and out, all but 4 of whom testified in favor of making the license optional. And the problem with Democrats and progressives, and sadly some Republicans, is it really doesn't matter. Facts really don't matter. I have my mind made up. I don't like you. I don't like your guns. You're not going to have them. I don't care what you're going to say to me. The answer is no. Now, there was one senator in the Judiciary Committee hearing who decided that, golly gee whiz, you just can't have guns. And
they're bad.
They're bad. They're bad. They're black. I mean, come on.
They kill people.
It's
terrible
just
thing.
It's terrible stuff. Yeah. And he did a little 20 minutes or so maybe remarks, and then the committee voted it to pass, and it went to the Senate floor, and that's where things got interesting, I think, because this particular senator had choreographed quite a complex and full of fancy footwork dance with other Democrats in the Senate.
It was kabuki theater at its best.
Yes, on a Potemkin stage. And the short version is that 2 Democrat senators, one basically said that it was an insult to intellect that women like us could try to make the case that women should have equal rights, and for Democrats who are supposedly the champions of women, that they wouldn't see the value in a woman not having to wait 2 weeks to get a license in the event that she were under a threat. They you can get an abortion in you don't have to wait 24 hours for an abortion, but you need to wait 2 weeks.
Go in and
to get a license to carry.
Not even if you're a kid.
Yeah, not even if you're a kid.
Really?
And another.
Kim, let me interrupt. Kim, I'm getting a sense here from Susan that this is a woman's issue as much as a firearms issue.
I wouldn't even call it a firearms issue. It's a Second Amendment issue.
True.
It's a human rights issue. But we are women, so it's a women's issue. I'm sorry, but I think we talked about last time, I'm a woman, and I looked in our New Hampshire Constitution, and that says it's my right. So this is a women's rights issue to us, and you can't argue that. I mean, you can go along all the different groups and rights, but Democrats like to speak to those rights, and they like to divide groups up. These actually are women's rights.
They are, okay.
Well, and sadly, there are, and we're being notified more and more every week from women who have applied for licenses and have either been,
Oh, you get the woman, yeah.
That, and what do you want it for? Why do you need
Going
this?
to their homes when
Going
they're
to
not
their-
supposed to be doing
yeah,
that?
Going to their homes to ask them what's this all about.
This is absolutely, right now, they are allowed, and let's face it, most of the police chiefs in New Hampshire are men. They are allowed to discriminatorily profile when handing out
Absolutely.
pistol licenses. And this bill, SB 116, will end that. Unless you specifically want to get your pistol license, you'll still have to do a lot of different things. But suitable is being changed as well.
Now, let me pause here for a minute, because like I say, once a month I and a criminal defense attorney run a class called Law Day. Now, when you say the police are going to your home and doing various things like this that I know are not part of the law, I know they do not have any right to ask these things. I'm solid on that law. So what exactly is happening here? Can either of you tell me?
We can surmise a number of things.
Sure.
It hasn't happened to either of us, so we don't have firsthand knowledge. But women who have contacted us, stories that we have been given, clearly demonstrate that this is happening to some women who have, as a law-abiding citizen, gone to local law enforcement, set out the application for their pistol license, and have been subject to the harassment is too heavy a word, I think.
Okay.
But the police do not have the right to ask. They do not have the right to come to your home. And one thing that has complicated this even further is, I know that you know, last year that the chief of police in Hooksett was sued by a gentleman who had been denied a license, and the plaintiff had stated in the lawsuit that according to, you know what the pistol license have looked like.
Oh, sure,
whatever.
yeah.
You go on that backside, a fifth bullet point down, it defined suitable as a person not prohibited by federal law. Now, this person was not prohibited by federal law and took the chief to court. Well, the court said, golly gee whiz, there's no definition of suitable in New Hampshire statute.
Yeah,
and
that's
we
true.
must give discretion to local law enforcement. And that just because that was printed on the Department of Safety's form, which had not been subject to JELCAR, and that had been pulled out of the body parts of certain people,
Commissioners?
assistant commissioners, that this plaintiff had no right to rely on whatever was written on that document. So it without any word, and the only reason we found out about that is all of a sudden the license changed. You remember that kerfuffle?
Oh, I'm very
Okay.
familiar with it.
And it completely was arbitrarily changed to suit this new Supreme Court. It wasn't even a decision. It was a sort of a ruling. It
yeah.
wasn't even an
Ruling.
opinion.
Right.
So now suitable is totally at the discretion of local law enforcement. So he might not like that you're in a green vest.
He might not.
He might not like
And
that.
he might not be Irish.
And he might not be
That'd
Irish.
be a pity, a terrible thing.
It
you
would
know.
be. It would be. And so now there is no protection. Those of us that had believed that suitable meant not prohibited, it's whatever. If he's having a bad day, maybe he's
Yeah.
hungover, maybe he's angry at his wife. Who knows? If he doesn't like you,
Now,
he
let's
can
go.
deny that license, and it's on you and
To
your
prove,
lawyer
yeah.
to prove otherwise.
Now let's go back to Senate Bill 116 for a second. I understand there's a paragraph in there that addresses that particular problem and straightens it out.
Yes.
So tell us about that. Kim, either one, how about you? Let's go.
Well, it'll just say, I believe the paragraph specifically says, whoever is legally able to purchase and possess a firearm.
It strikes the word suitable.
Right.
Amen.
Amen.
God.
And says not prohibited by law.
Yeah.
Currently by state law, and it may be tweaked a little bit when it comes
To
over
include
the Senate,
federal, but
to include federal. Just even though
it means that.
it says that, so it was meant to clear that up.
I see. Now,
But the Department of Safety says there's going to be blood in the streets.
Susan, would you do me a favor, please, at this time? My little friend Sean here has just turned around to look at you, and I give you a little wave here. And I was wondering if you could explain to Kim exactly what that means.
I already know what it means. You don't have to tell me.
Where do you hear that, O'Malley, for crying out loud? She's right on top of the whole thing, you know. Oh.
I'm Irish.
It means
I speak the language of my people.
No, it means that the time with you is just about out.
Yeah.
Yes, as a matter of fact. So what I'd like to do at this point, as we're heading to a closing, first of all, I'd like to ask both of you, would it be possible for you to come back and do another show, another 28
We're very shy, Don.
Yeah, I've seen you in action. Don't give me that. Okay, it's wrap-up time. So with that, I am going to close the show by saying, folks, this has been Gorman on Target, and program brought to you by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, a club that is dedicated to firearms training, safety, and education. Sean, say goodnight to the folks. Good night, you darlings.